Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar. And let me introduce myself. My name is Alessandro Baldo, and I work at Tecnoteca as a senior analyst. And I am also the project leader of the Ready-to-Use project. And today I'm going to explain you something about the CMDBuild Ready-to-Use. So we will have an overview of the product, and also we will speak about the configuration management. Let me show you just a few slides. First of all, before starting, I want to talk about a bit about our plan to regarding the webinars that we want to have in the future this year. So today we are going to talk about an overview of the ready-to-use product and the configuration management module. But we plan to have also other webinars, and here I have a list of topics that we thought. So, for example, the data reconciliation and the integration of CMDB Ready-to-Use with external systems. Another topic will be the service desk and the self-service portal. So in this case, we will talk about IT processes and incident management, request fulfillment, and so on. And then asset life cycle and asset management. This is another topic regarding the management of the life of an asset from the receiving of the good to the disposal. And at last, we thought about also some special sessions regarding very specific topics that might be difficult to understand for someone that is new to CMDB Ready-to-Use. And those topics are the management of the KPI, the performance indicators, especially regarding the data quality that we introduced in the latest version of Ready-to-Use data model, and also regarding the SLA management. And regarding today, we are going to talk about the configuration management module of Ready-to-Use. So first of all, we are going to have an overview of what you can do with CMDB Ready-to-Use. Then we will go more in deep in the configuration item hierarchy, and I will show you which kind of elements can be managed and the kind of relations that we have, and then we will see also a little bit about what we can do regarding the menus, the roles, permissions, and the configuration of, for example, a custom layout. And then we will see also how to track the history of what was done in CMDBuild by who and when. And then we will see an example of a report and a dashboard to show information in a different way. And the management of attachments, so the attachment of any kind of file to a card in CMDBuild. And then also a little bit the geolocalization. And I wanted to tell you that you can ask anything in any moment. You have available a chat on your right, so you can ask the questions that came up to your mind while I present. But I will answer the questions all at the end. So I will keep track of all the questions that I see, and then when I finish the presentation, we will have a session where I can answer all the questions. So I encourage you to write in the chat, and don't be afraid about the chat. So we can start. When we enter in CMDB Ready-to-Use, you will find if you use, for example, the demo database that is available, you'll find some data inside, but the data model is the same for all the CMDBuild ready-to-use users, and you will find a navigation on the left. And in the navigation, you will find some folders with some functionalities that we have. And more or less, a folder is reflecting an area where we can work inside the data model. And then at the end, you can also see all items. So in a moment, we are going to see also the difference why we have all items and we have the navigation. First of all, I'm going to give you an overview of what we have in all these folders, but then we will center more on the asset inventory folder, which is the most important one for today's topic, which is the configuration management. So in the registry, you can see some other folders, the one regarding the employees, locations, customers, and suppliers. So the purpose of this area is to store information that is related to the assets, and it is useful to complete the inventory of the assets, the IT assets that we need to store and manage inside the CMDBuild ready-to-use. For example, I want to know an asset who belongs to, so I want to store the employees. Or I want to know where it is, so I want to know, I want to have an inventory of all my locations. And the same can apply to the customers and suppliers. So I want to store information regarding from who I bought an asset and about the customers that are related to my company. Let me. Okay, so and then asset inventory we are going to see later more in deep, because this is the topic of today. I'm going to show you just briefly the service desk is regarding the IT processes. In particular, we have a page, a dashboard for the service desk operators, where an operator can check the status of the help desk. And then you have all the functions here regarding the service desk functions. Service catalog is is related with the service desk, because here you can manage the services that you are offering and the KPI and so on. So also this is related to the service desk. Asset lifecycle is also one of the topics that I mentioned when I was talking about the future webinars. So here we have asset management, the management of the warranties and related functions. A self-service portal is the configuration of what we can show in the portal, and this also goes together with the service catalog. And that's it. We have these folders, and also we have all items. Normally, we suggest to your users to hide the all items menu, because here you will see all the possible elements that the user can see, regardless the function. So my suggestion is that to your final users, especially if they are not very technical, to show them specifically one or more folders and hide the all items, and you can do so in the admin module. So they will not be afraid about seeing many items here, because here, as you can see, there are many classes, folders, and a non-technical user could be afraid of having so many items here. So regarding the today's topic, in the asset inventory, we have also other folders, and in the configuration item, what we consider a configuration item in CMDBuild ready to use is an object that can be managed and, for example, can be used in a ticket. So I want to open a ticket, and I want to open a ticket saying that there is a malfunction on a specific server or on a specific object that can be, for example, part of the workplaces, can be part of the infrastructures, can be a software, can be a phone, and so on. And so in every folder here, we grouped classes of elements that we thought are similar in the usage, that in everyday usage, let's say. All the hardware is connected to a catalog. In the catalog, you can store a list of all the brand models and part numbers that you manage. And this is convenient because then for each item here, you can also check how many elements you have of the same model. So, for example, here I have 11 monitors of this specific model. And you can do so. You can also create a report or create some statistics regarding the inventory that you have. And if you store information that are common in the hardware catalog item, you don't need to replicate the same information to every asset that you have. For example, you have 100 monitors of the same branded model, and you have a user manual. You can attach the user manual directly to the item here, and you will store only one file instead of 100 files. So you can attach here one file with the user manual, and if one of your users need to check the manual, they can do so by checking it in the hardware catalog connected to the monitor. And this catalog is available for both hardware and software. In the hardware has a certain fields, in the software some other fields, for example the version of the software, and in the hardware you will find a part number, but they are very similar in meaning. So in the workplaces, you can see the status of all the let's say a client hardware that you manage. So the client directly used by the employees of your company, for example, you can check which ones are available, so they are not assigned to anyone, or the ones that are assigned, or maybe they are disused, or they are under maintenance, and so on. So here you can check the list of all the computers, desktop, notebook, mobile, or all together desktop plus notebook plus mobile. So this is just a view to check all the client computers together. And for every computer you can store information regarding the host name, the serial number, so the classical information that we need to store about an asset. You can divide the information in groups. For example, we have a general data group here, we have a location. So here we want to know in which building, floor and room, for example. We have also some administrative data group or other technical information that we might want to store. And note that if your computer belongs to a catalog, you don't need to specify some technical information because the catalog has the information. So if I have a notebook of a certain type, the CPU installed in the notebook is the same for all the notebooks of that specific model. So I don't need to write this information in every single asset. I just need to write it in the catalog. And then here you also have information about the software. So the software, in this case, client software. So this is normally a software that is used by final users, like final employees, and not a server infrastructure software. For example, this could be an example, Photoshop or Office 365 and so on. And also the software can be linked to a specific product, the catalog, but in this case it will be linked to the software catalog instead of the hardware catalog. And also the software must be installed in a computer. So in this case we know where it is installed. And we can check the relations of, for example, this software client, which is Office 365, is assigned to a person, and it runs on a notebook. For example, if we go to the notebook, we can also check in the details how many software are installed in this computer. So in this case, we can see that we only have Office 365, but we could have other software installed. And this can be done for every computer. So in the computer, I can check in the details if it has peripherals attached or network interfaces and the installed software. For example, we can check it in the desktop. We can check the same relations, or we can do this in the relations or in the details. For example, this one has a network interface. And you'll notice that in the details I see less things than I can see in the relations. Because only the relations that I want to show also here in the details will be shown here. And this is more convenient, for example, when I could have many items attached to a single item, which could be the case of the software. It's convenient because from here I can also check all the details of the specific card that is linked to the desktop in this case. Another way to check the relations is also through the relation graph, which is accessible here in using this icon. For example, in this case, I can see the linked elements to this desktop. For example, the supplier, the room, and the complex, the floor, and so on. And I can do this from any element. For example, in this case, I did it from the desktop, but I can do the same from an employee, for example. And I also have available this button. For example, in the employee, I can see other relations. I can see that has some services attached, is linked to an organizational unit, and is part of a corporate group, and so on. So this is another way to check the relations of a card. And the same relations that I see here, they are the same that I also see from the relations tab. Going back to the workplaces. So here also we have the possibility to manage the peripherals. In our case, we just managed monitors and printers. But I wanted to mention that the data model of ready-to-use, because it is based on the CMDBuild engine that is behind, is flexible and can be expanded and modified. So it is possible to create new entities, new classes, and create or modify attributes. So it's perfectly fine if you find that you need a specific attribute in the class desktop or in the class monitor, and you want to add new attributes. You can do it from the admin module, and you can expand the data model. So don't be afraid if you see that maybe the entity that you want to manage is not listed here, because it's quite common to expand this data model with what is needed. So in our case, in the peripherals, we can manage monitors or printers, and the same like it happens in the client software. Every peripheral must be linked to a specific computer. For example, in this case, it is linked to this computer. And if we check the relation, we can see that it's connected to a notebook with this code and this description. And if we double click on the notebook, we can open the related card, which is the notebook card. And also from here, we can see in the relations and in the details, we can see that, for example, this one has attached a printer and a monitor, so two peripherals, and also installed software, two softwares, so instances, so for example, both Photoshop and Office. Okay, so here in the workplaces, there is also a nice feature, which is the dashboard item monitor. And this is just an example of a dashboard that can be implemented in CMDBuild Ready2Use. And for example, this one is showing some statistics about the items that we have in our system, and the availability of the assets. So, for example, if the is a leasing, or rented asset, or owned, or we can have a statistic about the status of the asset, so in use, available, or disused, or whichever other status that you have. Here we are not going to see all the possible statuses, but only the statuses that correspond to an asset that is currently visible in the system. Or we can also check the assets by age. So, but again, this is just an example of all the possible statistics that we could implement here. So here we just checked the date when the asset was put into, was, let's say, installed in our system, and we can check the date compared to today to see the age of the asset, so less than 1 year, between 1 and 2 years, or 3-4 years or more. And at last, in this item monitor dashboard, we can also see the statistics about the kind of asset that we have. For example, physical server, phone, monitor, and desktop. So we can see that the monitor and desktop are the most common ones. And to build this kind of dashboards, you need to create a function in the database. So you need to have some SQL skills to do so. And once you created the function, you can show it here and configure it in the admin module. So going forward, we also have the infrastructure. So we saw in the workplaces everything regarding the hardware that is considered client hardware. In the infrastructure, we can see everything that is considered, let's say, server hardware. So what we use in our infrastructure. So here we have all the servers. And in the servers, it's just like we did with the computers. In the all servers, we can show both physical and virtual servers. Virtual servers is like a virtual machine, and for example, in this part of the system, we could configure. If we have a CMDBuild installation, we can configure how it is structured. So, for example, we have a virtual machine 1 and virtual machine 2, maybe put together in a clustering configuration. And maybe we have a machine for the database, which we call the CMDB. And we also have a load balancer, so CMDB LB. And we can group them together. And I'm going to show you later this, to say that they belong to they provide the same, for example, service. Maybe the service could be, for example, the inventory or the help desk. So if you manage the help desk through CMDBuild, the CMDBuild environment will be composed by all the machines that are necessary for CMDBuild to run. In this case, in the production, we need 4 machines, and in the test environment also other 4. Something that I didn't mention before is that in the grid you'll see some attributes, but in any moment you can decide to show more columns. For example, in this case, I want to check one attribute that I wanted to check. Remember if it's here. Or for example, alias, assigné, I want to show. And you can decide to show other columns. But this setting is not, it's only temporary, let's say. Because this is configured by the administrator. But if you as a personal user, you prefer to use this configuration, you can always have the possibility to save the grid preferences using the button. Let me change the configuration. Okay, so you can see it here. So you have a button on the top right side of the window where you can save the preferences. Okay. And so every time you reload the page, this configuration will be kept only for you as a user. And the same applies for the filters. You can define your own filters. For example, I want to see only the servers that are assigned. I can save the filter. And every time I will find here filter that now it is saved. So if I go to another class, for example, and I go back, I can find the filter here. But also when I remove it and I clear it, if I go back, it is still there, and I can apply until I click delete. And this is a filter that is available only for the specific user, but also the administrator can define filters in the same way that we did, but from the admin module, and those filters will be available to all the users of a specific group. So going forward in the infrastructure folder here, we can also see that we have the possibility to manage clusters and the network devices, storages. So all these elements are normally part of the infrastructure. And we also have disks, rack. And regarding the racks, something interesting that I wanted to show is the possibility to print the layout of a specific of a rack. And this can be done using the rack layout menu here. So if you have something installed in the rack, you probably have set the specific position of that asset inside the rack, and this is read by the system to build this layout that will show you the occupation of the different units in a specific rack. And in fact, if I go, for example, to storage 01, and I check here the information that I have, I can see that I also have the information about where it is installed in the rack. So it is installed in this rack, but also in this unit, front, and the number of units that is occupying this asset. So with this information, I could the system will automatically build the report. Regarding the infrastructure, I don't have much else to say, but maybe we will get back here later. Regarding the software, so as I said, the software is also based on a catalog. So in the catalog, I can store here the information regarding both the client and the server software that I have available, including CMDBuild. So for example, if I want to store the information regarding CMDBuild READY2USE 2.1, I can store here the information. In the relations, I can see that I have 2 installations of this catalog item. Or if I check for example, Office 365, I can see that includes 6 software instances. And also I have the concept of software license. For example, for Office 365, I can say that I have a license of a certain serial number and I can manage like 50 instances. And if I wanted to check the status of all my licenses, I have available a view here, a summary of software licenses, that is going to tell me for each license that I have the number of serial numbers in total and the ones available. For example, the Office, I can see that has 44 possible places for installations. And I can also check here if I am in a negative situation. This is not going to prevent me for installing new software instances, but it is only a summary for the operators to check if they have available places of a specific license, or if they have installed too many software. And so the installations are divided into some categories that we also introduced here. But here again, the concept is the same. So the data model can be expanded. So if you want to manage a specific kind of software that you have in mind, you could create a new class and manage this new class. So we have, for example, the application, and in this case, I managed the CMDBuild ready-to-use applications. I have components. For example, in the components, we have the CMDBuild GUI framework component, or the Tecnoteca River and workflow engine that is integrated into CMDBuild. Normally, the components are something that must be attached to an application in order to work properly. So normally they don't live by their own. They need an application, and in fact here all the components are attached to a specific application. You notice here that also the application are installed in a specific asset. For example, CMDBuild ready-to-use, here we can see that has two components. It serves the business service helpdesk portal, and it runs on a server that is the virtual server, and also is included in the software catalog. So here we also integrate the concept of the inventory with the services. So if I go to the business service that I defined here, I double click on it. And here I can check again the relations, and I can see that this service depends on two applications ready to use, but also the web server, Apache, that will act as a load balancer, and also the Postgres SQL database. So I can define these relations to say that to provide this service, I need these applications or in general software that I have in my company. So this is useful to perform some analysis when there is a problem on a specific application, and I can also link this to the specific machines where the software is installed. But in reality, I already know that the application CMDBuild ready-to-use is installed in a specific machine. So if a problem happens in a machine, I know that it's going to affect the applications running on that machine, and I know that the application will affect the service. So by going through the relations, I can analyze the problem when there is an incident, for example, and I can check which users will be affected and which service will be affected. So here, for example, I could also add more information. I can say this also depends on, for example, here I can add the virtual server that is where the CMDB installation is installed. For example, the CMDB VM02 and the CMDB VM0201. Okay, so we save, and now I'm saying, okay, this this service basically depends on all these elements. Okay, so this relation is useful to perform this kind of impact analysis. Okay. Then I go forward. Here I have also a section regarding the phones. So it is possible to manage info regarding phones, especially SIM. So here I can store the information, the assignee of a specific SIM, the phone number, and if it is available or in use. And the same applies to the phones, desktop phones or mobile phones. So here I can store the information. All these elements are very similar because they all belong to the same hierarchy. I didn't mention this before, and you probably have noticed that all the elements that I listed until now, they have a very similar attributes. For example, the serial number, supplier, code, assignee, and so on. And this is because they belong to the same hierarchy, and this hierarchy of the configuration items. And the hierarchy is not the one that you can see from the menu here, because here the elements are grouped by their function, not following the hierarchy. The hierarchy is something that the final user doesn't need to know and is something technical, but the administrator of the system must be aware of it, and I can show it to you in the all items. If I check all the elements here, I can see that configuration item has a hierarchy that is composed by hardware, service, software, instance, and software license. And if I go forward in hardware, I can see client, phone, server, computer, and then finally desktop, mobile, notebook. So these are exactly the same elements that I can find also in the menu, in the navigation on the top. But here I will see the structure, the hierarchy that we have behind. And again, this the final user. It's better if we hide this for the final users, but the administrator at the moment of expanding the data model, for example, or tuning the data model, must be aware that there is a hierarchy, and a new classes must be placed in the correct place in the hierarchy. So if I have a new peripheral, I will place it in the client peripheral class, and so on. So this was just to mention the structure that we have. So going back to the asset inventory, so we mentioned the workplaces, the infrastructure, the software, the phones, and then we also have we can also store some information regarding the networks. So we can store information about the virtual LANs, VPNs, and so on, and the network interfaces, of course. So here, for every piece of hardware, but also for the virtual servers here, you can manage and list all the network information about the assets, and then the virtual IPs, which goes together with the virtual LAN. The network interfaces are very important, and here you'll find the information regarding the MAC addresses and IP addresses. And the network interface can be linked to another network interface to build a sort of network topology. We introduced the concept of a tree that can be inserted in the menu. And for example, we inserted a network topology tree with which you can, starting from a specific hardware, you can follow a specific hierarchy. So, for example, let's see if I can find yes one. For example, asset has a network interface, and the network interface is connected with another network interface of another asset. So following this tree, I can find the connections between hardware, and I can follow the network topology at infinite, possibly, because at the end, if I have a connection between two elements, I can follow this tree until I have relations with other elements. And this is also another way to check the relations. So as you can see from the piece of hardware router, I reached the desktop PC07. So now I know that this is connected to that router and is connected through a specific network interface. And if I want to know more information, I can always check everything, because here is treated like a normal card with all the functionalities. So I can check the details, the relations, and so on. So this is also regarding the networking. Then I have data quality, but as I said at the beginning, data quality is something that we will see in a specific session. So I just wanted to show you what we have here, the dashboards. I'm not going to explain this here, but I just wanted to show the graphs, so you will get curious when we have the session about this. And then here I defined another tree for the navigation, which is similar to the one that we have in the networking. And this one is simple, because it's just following the hierarchy of the locations. So building floor, a room, and for each room I can see the assets placed in a specific room. So I can do the same by following the relations normally through the cards, but here I can do everything in the same menu without need to move from one pop-up to another one. So when you select a specific element here, the children elements of that will be shown here until it is possible to show something. So until the room, for example, this one is empty, but the previous one that I was showing has two assets, one notebook and one desktop. And so in this you can build your own tree by selecting the relations that you wanted to show. Okay, so here we finished the asset inventory menu, and I'm going to tell you some more things about the asset inventory and the connected elements which are in the registry. And I'm going to show you some more features about the configuration management module. And if you have questions, I just remind you to also put them in the chat, because at the end I will also answer those questions. So very briefly, I want to show you the possibility to print desktop for the desktop, but you can configure it also for other classes. You can generate a QR code. For example, this is the QR code for a desktop, and this can be done using a function that we have in the contextual menu. And this is also configured, and you will find in the Ready2Use 2.1 is configured in the admin module. And then in the registry, I have the locations that before I didn't talk about this. I just wanted to mention that you have the possibility to place object in a map. For example, in this case, I just placed the location of 3 buildings. One is our real headquarters, and we have 2 more locations here. And you have the possibility to place the allocation, and if you want to move it, you can move it to another place, and so on. This can be done for building, but for every class that you have in CMDBuild. I'm not going in deep to discuss about this, because it will be shown in other sessions, probably in the OpenMaint webinar, because this is more a topic that is more used in the webinar, in the OpenMaint. And then yes, regarding the attachments, for example, in the software applications, we go back here. For example, it is possible to attach any kind of file, and if the file is an image, you can also check the preview. For example, in this case, I attached the schema of clustering schema for CMDBuild. In this case, I attached a file of type schema, which is a custom type that I defined from the admin module. So you can also define your own types. And for the different type, for example, you can decide that has a different file type. For example, you can decide the maximum size, that is 2 megabytes in this case. You can decide which type. For example, here I can only select this one, that is an image. But if I select another kind of file, like general purpose, I can select any kind of file, so documents and so on. And also, for example, you can decide that one of these types is a compulsory for a specific class. For example, in the service, typical example is in the contract. Maybe I have a contract, and here I have one contract, and everything is fine. But if I open another one, I go to the attachments, and the system will warn me that the system was expecting to find at least one type, one contract attached to this card. Is not preventing me from the normal work that I can do on the card, but it's just warning me that I should attach at least one contract. Then, of course, the system cannot check what is inside, but at least the user knows that the expected behavior is that one. And then also, it is possible to define a custom layouts for a class. You might notice that here in the normally in the default layout you have two columns, and each attribute is shown in half of the page. But from the admin module, you can define specific layouts, and this can be done for every class. For example, for the notebook, I defined just as an example a layout that is different from the default, up to 4 columns. And regarding the roles, the groups, in this case, I belong to many groups, and I am administrator, but if I can change group to, for example, network help desk, and as you can see, this specific group has less permission and a different menu. For example, as you can see, I don't have the menu regarding the services, the self-service portal here, so I have less items in the menu, and in the employee, I can for example, here, I cannot edit the card because I only have read-only permission. And one last thing that I wanted to mention is that you can also define the same menu for different groups, but if they don't have permission to see specific classes, even the folders will disappear. So you can use the same menu for multiple groups, or you can decide for a specific group, you can define a specific menu. So if I change group to another group, I have here another menu that is similar to the administrator one, with the items that before were disappeared. And in the contextual menu that I showed you before, you have here also the possibility to enable multi-selection. And if you enable multi-selection, you can perform massive operations on the cards. So, for example, I can edit. For example, I choose one specific item here. For example, I can change the type to regular for all of them, and I change the value of this attribute, or I change again the type to trainee. Okay, so now it's changed to trainee, and this can be done also to all items if I select all of them. If I open one of those cards, I can in any moment, and this is valid for every kind of card in CMDBuild Ready2Use, I can check the history. The history is the tracking of what was done in the past, by who. So I can see that demo user changed this value to trainee in this moment. So this is very important for the administrator to keep track of what was done in the past in the system. And here you also have the possibility to create custom views, and you can play with it, but I created a view here. For example, I want to show the list of computers, and but I also wanted to show the contacts person of the person that is has the asset assigned, because maybe I need to contact it very fast. And normally this you cannot obtain this in the same grid in CMDBuild, because the attribute of the email and the phone comes from the employee class, while all the other attributes, the serial number and the host name, come from the desktop class. So you can mix together the fields from different classes. Okay, so I don't have other topics now. I will just leave space to the questions. And before that, I want to remind you that if you have any questions, you can refer to the our social contacts. So you can refer to the CMDBuild Ready2Use website, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter, and you can follow on our social networks. And you also have the forum available if you need to ask any question. And also you can also check the online documentation that you have available in the CMDBuild website and in the CMDBuild Ready2Use website.